Okay, so everybody can see screen and everything like that. We're ready to get rolling. Uh-oh, did I? Second here. Cancel that. I got the wrong file. Where's today's class? There we go. Okay, are we ready here? There are my slides. And we're live. So, good morning. And we got our morning pictures. Folks have been sending me pictures. Thank you. I got a lot now. So I'm going to have to start fitting them in each class. I've got a few just from the weekend, quite a rainstorm that we had on Saturday night and Sunday morning. So this was yesterday morning that I'm back in Kingsburg again and looking out, and it was really, really stormy, but you were getting light coming up. It ended up being a nice day in the end. And then we went over to Hurdles Beach, which isn't far away. Dora loved it. She liked the beach there. You can see how the waves were. This was still early in the morning, nobody around at that point. Hurdles Beach is often very, very busy when it's stormy weather with the surfers coming in. But this one Hannah sent in, and that I know most of you are in Halifax and know the space, and that but some of you are away, and I'm not sure if some of you have actually been to Halifax yet, corresponding with a number of students that are international students. I suspect they've never been here. So behind the St. Mary's campus, uh, there is what we call the railway cut, and it's a way for the railway to come out onto the peninsula and right to the end of Halifax into the harbor. And it loops around a large portion of Halifax, and it's cut very deeply into rock. For those of you that know the campus, I don't know if you know that behind the campus, if you go behind the Loyola building and across the street there's a house, old house with nice grounds around it and now parking lots around it. It's the Stanfield property. It was uh, home owned by the former Premier of Nova Scotia and a fellow that uh, was leader of the opposition when Pierre Trudeau was Prime Minister many years ago. But that property is owned by the university. But what people don't know is if you go behind the house, go walk around it, towards the railway cut where it is, St. Mary's owns a large tract of land that runs from that all the way to the end of Beaufort Street, which maybe you'd have to walk around. But if you're on campus and you need a quiet space to walk, many people walk down to Point Pleasant Park, but there's a much nicer spot, a little rough, uh, need appropriate footwear, but it's along this railway cut here. Not exactly where this bridge is. This is a little bit closer to the harbor, but it's along this area and it can be really, really nice. And nobody seems to know about it. One piece of announcement, because we're getting into Excel today, and I'm going to have your first assignment ready this week. And you may start getting into questions where you want help beyond myself. We do have a Math Help Center. They've been operating in a virtual format that you can, there are ways you can register with the center, and then you can log into their Brightspace site and get updates on different sorts of things. I've posted on Top Hat near the top of the content tree, right at the very beginning, just below the course outline, information about the center and the days, times, and the like, where they're running what they're calling virtual study hall and peer study sessions. And you can participate in those. I know a number of the students that are leading those, really, really good students, that you should be able to get some good help there. In addition to myself, you can always get after me for help. Do we have a Snap or Insta group? Good question. I know at the beginning of the term, a whole bunch of students shared their Snap IDs. I don't use either platform, so this would really be organized by yourselves. Um, Maybe along the way, someone should teach me how to join. So if you want me to be part of your group, I can, but I've got to figure out how to do it. That, uh, uh, but I must say, I'm not. I have no expertise in social media at all. I don't really participate in it. But if you need assistance in that regard, if I can contribute, don't hesitate to ask. So, where are we? We've defined a business problem. We've uh, trying to get that down to a specific set of questions. If we could answer those questions, we can address the problem. And usually it's getting that first set of questions, and that can be hard. And there we may have some back and forth as we're working through the project. We may end up having to go back to the start and look at those questions once again and see if we can find additional data. If we're using a survey, then we should be defining those questions at the very outset, because we can't really go back and redo our survey. That the data we're using often is from an administrative database, like Banner, I'd use for student data, or all the transaction information that Amazon or other groups collect on you, or survey data. And we'll be using survey data today. It's generally very messy. Even good quality administrative data still has some messy bits in it. Uh, the more you know the database, the less likely you've got problems within it. But it's not unusual, we'll see it today, that we'll probably need to do some cleaning. And I'll show you what that means. So today we're going to look at a data set in Excel. I'm going to talk about protecting your data, because Excel is a dangerous environment for doing data analysis. It's an easy environment, but that ease comes at a price, which sometimes means you can mess up your data quite badly. That things, a data dictionary, keeping track of what does everything mean. That what it's sort of not quite. When if you did Quant One, that the with Quant One, probably the instructors got after you. Always define your variables. If you're using X for something, what is X? And defining your variables at the start, that's like a data dictionary. We'll get to that. And picking names for variables that you can remember easily is also very, very helpful. We'll get to that as well. We're going to look at a little bit of recoding our data and different ways we can do that, and that's going to fill up our class today. Well, you've probably read chapter 2 because you've done the quiz, but there are a couple of how-to videos on Excel within that, and if there are topics that you would like me to build additional ones, I'll do that. So first off, before I get into a data set, just again, I'm a very visual person. So what does data look like? I don't like things that are totally abstract. And COVID is one where we can see data sets readily, in very often in a graphical fashion. So there is numbers behind it, and you can get at the numbers, but pictures are helpful getting a sense of what's the data look like. And you'll see through the term, I'm a very visual person. I like to look at my data visually. So both Google News and MSN News have COVID sites, and this comes from MSN, that I asked for daily fatality counts, and since the beginning of the pandemic, and this is the American data, and you can see that we had a first wave in the spring. Then the US, they had a smaller wave again as things reopened again in the summer. This is in August. They did lockdowns again, things got under control, and now everything has gone crazy. And in Canada, we're getting this craziness too, but not quite as bad under the mortality or fatality counts. Still, it's not very pleasant. What I find interesting in this is the picture. That you'd think this is daily counts. Why isn't it smooth? Any ideas why it has these gaps all the way along? That's why I like to look at it visually, because I can start to see strange things. Why do we have gaps? Take weekends off. You got it, Chris. So Many states don't report over the weekend. Some of our provinces are slow in reporting on weekends. And so if they didn't report on the weekend, then of course there's a backlog that are going to get reported on Monday and Tuesday. And so we get a spike at the beginning of the week, runs down. This is probably normal, and then it drops. And so some graphs you'll see, they do weekly averages, the average per day for each of the weeks, and it smooths that out. But watch it with some reporting that it's not consistent. You get strange things. In Canada, we're better at getting provinces to report every day of the week. Here's the Canadian data, and but you still get sudden drops. We do have some of these things that may well be weekends, but look at this crazy spike here, crazy spike there. That we got holes on certain days in it that it doesn't show on this graph. I used a different one last term that was based upon Google News data. They report totals per day, or sorry, cumulative totals. How many fatalities have we had since the beginning? Uh, and they report it that way. And I would capture their data each day and then look at, okay, what's today's total compared to yesterday's total? Look at the difference and get my daily counts. MSN gives me daily counts. And what students noted last term was some of the daily counts I calculated were negative. Any thoughts as to what's happening here? Any thoughts about strange spikes like this one or that one? No? No one's typing? Daniel? Holidays? No, not. Look how big it is. It's massive. It's like several days, like almost a whole week, this one. What has happened, and it's not unusual, is the data keeps flowing in from the hospitals into the public health office, and they accumulate it, they report it. Along the way, sometimes folks make mistakes or they haven't kept up with the reporting. This was, I think, in Quebec, there was a backlog of cases that hadn't been reported. And so actually, these two spikes represented cases from over a whole month that had been unreported, or in some instances, it was reclassification. They had gone back through the health records and said, no, this one should have been classified as a COVID case when it wasn't. So they've fixed up their data over time. And when they do it, when we get these big corrections coming in, we get these strange things. And these ones here, though, these were spikes up. It turns out in the actual data, there are some spikes that go down where they did their recalculations and said, oh, we've overcounted the number of cases. And so over the last month, this jurisdiction didn't have 121 cases. It only had 43. So let's take out 78 cases. And when they do it, we end up then for the day a negative value. So you get strange things. Just to show you another one that's erratic, this is Sweden. Sweden, I haven't been looking at much of late, but I was looking at it early on because Sweden, of the European countries, didn't go for all of the social distancing, closing bars, making face masks mandatory, and the like that you saw in a lot of other jurisdictions in Europe, with the thought that, well, lots of people are going to get it, then we'll get herd immunity, and then we won't have a problem anymore. And they were being held up as an example. Many businesses in Canada were saying, why don't we be like Sweden? Sweden's a good country. The death toll in Sweden is significantly higher than Norway, Denmark, Finland, countries from the same region that did put in more controls, so that Sweden's economy wasn't hit nearly as badly, but that was at the cost of more deaths that they had there. And they've had other problems. They also have problems in reporting, as you can see. Nothing, 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 then a big spike. nothing for a week, then a spike. So it's even questionable how the tracking is being done there. Quite surprising. I point this out just to remind you that the data that we're consuming, think about where it comes from, how much trust you should put into it. And there's a lot of valid information in the graphs I just gave you, but you have to be cautious in reading it. You can't talk about massive increases one day versus another if the reporting isn't consistent day to day. Maybe you should be looking at, in Sweden, maybe monthly how they're performing, and in the US, how they're doing it weekly, and not look at daily types of reports that you hear. So be careful about it. We've got to be very critical consumers. And most of the time, you're going to be consumers of data in whatever your employment function is. That I'm not expecting you to become data scientists, but you're going to be eating the stuff that they give you. And to better understand how to be a good consumer, you have to have an understanding of how the producer produces that data or produces the analysis behind the data. And let's try to be intelligent about that. So let's walk through a problem. And my business issue was how much students expect to earn after they graduate. That, and not immediately at graduation, because sometimes it's hard to get a job. And very often, studies of uh, employment success of graduates, they look at 2 years after graduation, maybe 5 or 6 years afterwards, 10 years after sometimes. But the most common type of study is 2 years. And that rather than looking, and there have been many studies done of how much they actually earn, there's been very little research on what their expectations are. What do you think you're going to earn when you graduate 2 years after graduating? And trying to get a sense of, are expectations different among different groups of students? Would it vary by program? And I think you would expect engineers would expect to be earning more than history grads or something like that. What about domestic versus international? And there we might have to caution, are those international students that plan on staying in Canada and working in Canada and what their expectations are, or would they plan on going home? Because they're different employment markets, so it might be hard to compare in that regard. Men and women, a lot of work's been done on what they earn after they graduate, but what do they expect to earn? And how does your attitude, if many of you are directly out of high school, so I'm presuming you're under 20 or under 21. By the time you graduate, you'll have more experience, more knowledge. Do your expectations change as you move through your program? That uh, are you really worried about finding the job more than how much you'll earn? A whole bunch of different things that are there. So I could, under that big heading of what are student expectations of earnings, that breaks into a lot of little questions. So how we translate the business issue into a set of questions we can try to answer specifically. And the data we'll use, it's the same that's used throughout the first couple of chapters in the text. It's from a survey from 10 years ago. And what I have available from my old job was the data for St. Mary's. It was a national survey. There were about 30, 35 universities participated. And there was a summary report for all of the institutions together, but I can't find it. All I could find from the study that was done was the data file that was sent to us on the St. Mary's student responses. And in it, I could look at a variety of questions, and we'll get to this shortly. They had some of them were, are you concerned about finding a job? Maybe a job in your field of study. If you're an HR major, are you concerned about finding a job in human resource management? Is that different from the student that's studying accounting and finding a job in accounting when they graduate? That, does that matter to you? And this you can think about in some different disciplines that don't prepare them for specific jobs. Are they looking to graduate and find a job in their major? maybe you can find a job, but it's not going to pay very well. And there are a lot of those out there, unfortunately. And you have certain expectations of what you'd like to earn when you graduate to pay off your student loan. Do you think it'll be hard to find that job? Or we get many students that uh, they have they want to stay in Atlantic Canada. Maybe that's their original home, and they don't want to go to Fort McMurray to find a job. That Atlantic Canadians are famous for moving to. Years ago, it was places in southern Ontario, and then for a long time it was Alberta. Uh, that Even when I graduated from university a very long time ago, many of my classmates were looking at finding jobs in northern Canada, in northern Alberta. Even back then, that's where the jobs were. Um, uh, Many Nova Scotians went down in the 1960s and 70s down to New England, down to Boston to find work. Uh, Long history of having to leave. So is that a big worry? That is mobility. And what do you expect to earn? That was a question in that survey. How long do you think it's going to take you to find that job? So those were some of the questions in the survey, and they look like they'll be helpful. Now, those were outcomes. What happens? Generally, we're looking at those are outcomes and what things can we use to predict them or to categorize people. And so often we'll look at demographic data that maybe when did you start? What type of program are you in? That'd probably be relevant. Where did you go to school? Maybe where you're from, not sure. That uh, I don't think we asked about domestic or international, but we did know whether or not they went to school in Canada or outside Canada. Gender was there, age was there, that some of our students are older, mature students. Their expectations will be different. Uh, Parental education is one of my favorites to bring in. Parental education is one of the strongest predictors of what happens with a student. Very common in the US. It's one of the biggest determinants of their future career success is really what socioeconomic group they came from. And if they came from a privileged group, they're probably going to be successful. And if they came from a group that was economically or socially, racially disadvantaged, they're probably going to have more struggle to it. And the we can't ask those questions, but parental education is often a good indicator of those types of things. And language may be relevant. Don't know. So I've got a file. It's in the week 2 folder in Top Hat, and we're going to look at that in just a second, and we'll look at the spreadsheet that we've got there. And I'm going to jump away from my slides. So here I'm already getting into it. So in this slide deck that I'll post, it has a whole bunch of screenshots of things that I plan on doing within Excel. But probably the next little while, I'm going to pop back and forth between my slides and Excel. Okay. So even there, I'll try to show you two different things. First, let me go and show you the data file. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that you can see my ugly face and I can see your chat. So there's my file in Excel. We'll make it a little bigger so that we can see what's there. And you will see it's a file. It's got columns. There's an ID that everybody was given. Survey language. Did they take the survey in English or French? There was question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, and a whole bunch of numbers down below that. And if you go across, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of columns because the survey had a huge number of questions to it. There's a whole bunch of blank ones in the middle. I'm not sure why. But so there's a lot here. You'll notice at the bottom I've got tabs, and this is the data. And trying to figure out what these mean is awkward. And we'll be talking about that shortly in terms of needing a data dictionary. So I'll just mention a couple of the tabs that are here. And within Excel, Excel is structured as, we call it a workbook, like a notebook, and we have pages to it, different sheets to it. Each sheet will be the same. It's got columns that are headed by letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, and across, and rows corresponding to did I do screen share? You're not seeing my spreadsheet? So I thought I did it before. Are folks seeing my sheet? No? Patrick can see it. Okay. All right. So each row is a survey response. Each column is a question in the survey. That some of you may be using Office 365. If you're in Office 365, it looks a little different. It's sort of a stripped down version. Whoops, there we go. Let's shrink this thing again. I don't like Office 365. If you have a choice between the two, have the full version of Excel. 365 seems to be missing some things, and sometimes their layout is different. If you look at the top of the screen, the different things that are up here that you see in it versus what you see with my Excel spreadsheet of different tabs up here and other things that may be within it, are different from each other. Okay? That a second tab that's here, second sheet, is called, in this data file, called question numberings. Again, that's small and maybe hard to read. Make it bigger. So it had Q1. The first question is, in what province is the post-secondary institution you're currently enrolled at? It was a national survey, so there was a number for each province. That the name of the institution, and there was from a list they could pull out in each institution. St. Mary's must have had a number. What were we? We were institution 18, and our province was province 7. And each of these ones give me words that tell me about these things. In which province did you complete high school? Question 7. Great, but question 7. These numbers here, how do I know what they are? I've already guessed that 7 is Nova Scotia because that's where St. Mary's is. But what is province 5? What's province 8? What's province 14? This doesn't tell me what that is. That's very, very frustrating. What came in the original data file, and these 3 tabs are what came in the original file sent to me. They gave me another one called interpreted data, which again, let me make it bigger. And so if I scroll down to question 7, there we go. It said, what province did you complete high school? And it lists them. So Ontario, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 7th in the list is Nova Scotia. So if I see someone responding 7, that's Nova Scotia. If they responded 8, they're New Brunswick. This is a lot of work to understand just what's in this file. How do I make sense of it, the way it's so cluttered and so on? So that's some of the sorts of things that we're going to have to go and take a look at. Let me look at my slides. Ooh, there they are. So there are a lot of these different sorts of things that are frustrating. So there it was. Understanding what things are, we call a data dictionary. And so for every data file you have, ideally you should have a data dictionary. This one doesn't, but it has 2 sheets, one question numberings, the other interpreted data, that help me make up a dictionary. So that was the questions in the survey, and the interpreted values tell me what they meant. So I could pull some of these things out. Here's one that's fun. Um, Look at this one. Question 5. What type of program are you currently enrolled? This is data for St. Mary's. Okay. And so this is probably the first program is education. That would be 1. Visual performing arts is 2. Humanities is 3. Social science 4. Most of you are in business, so we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 6 would be business. And you'll notice we had a lot of business students answer the survey. We had a lot of art students in humanities or social sciences answering the survey. We had some science students split among physical sciences and math, computing science, had some engineers. We had 7 people that picked education. 3 of them picked visual and performing arts. 2 were in medicine. We've got 3 that are in law. Um, Personal protective services. Someone, what exactly is going on here? Uh, are you aware of St. Mary's offering these programs? No, we don't. Education we used to offer, but it hasn't been offered in about 25 years. So what's going on? That they uh, will look at those sorts of issues, and they will keep coming up. But if you hadn't looked at the actual data, you wouldn't have started to spot that some people seem to be picking programs that don't fit. Okay? That I'm going to go in to this data file and I'm going to start changing it so that it's easier for me to read and work with. I'm going to try to make it into a format that makes some sense to me. And I look at this, it's just mix of all kinds of stuff. So, and I'm going to make changes. If I was using software that's really designed for data analysis, statistical software, it makes a point of never touching my data. The data, this sheet, will always stay the way it is. That any changes I make will be done separately. Actually, what it does is tries to record all the changes I made as a script, like a computer program, so that um, I could go back and see how I made the changes. I could undo the changes because I know all of the things in the sequence in which I did them in. Excel doesn't keep that for me. Once I make a change in Excel, it's gone. I can't go backwards, especially if I've saved the file. I can't go back. In many instances, the undo only works on certain things, not everything. So even that little undo arrow doesn't bail me out. So we have to be very, very careful of modifying our original data. That so we need to protect it. Okay, what do I mean by that? Go back. There are different ways of doing it. That one way, I've damaged data more times than I can think, and sometimes it's become a real problem to get back the originals. That um, one way is to make a copy of the data and save it as a separate file that you can always go back to. And so you're always working with a copy of the original data. And that's one route that you can follow. Um, that what I'm going to do is copy just what I need from the data file. Other things you can do is go in Excel and go up to File and where is it here? I think it's under Options. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I jumped by it. Protect your workbook. So you can go, and right now my data tab is actually protected. I could unprotect that and take it off. But normally when we start out, I would click on this. I'd say protect it. You can protect it with a password if you plan on sharing the file and you don't want anybody modifying the data that's in there and have your own password. Uh, watch it. You can sometimes forget passwords. You probably heard about the fellow that had a Bitcoin account. Well, he still has one, and he's lost his password. And the uh, oh, you need a password to unprotect it? I probably used password. Let's see what happens. Not correct. Maybe with a capital P? No. I can't remember now what I used in it. See? There, I've done it. Messed myself up. I can fix that though. I could just go, let me go backwards here. I can still copy it all. Okay? So that was the original one. It's stuck there forever. I've gone and copied the whole thing. I could, down here, there's a little plus sign, and I could paste it in. Whoops, excuse me. And there are different paste options. Let me just take the default. And there, now this isn't protected. And now I can edit this one all I like. Okay? So that's one route that we could follow in doing it. What I'm going to do with this as I work through, get rid of that sheet, is I'm going to be using only a certain number of questions. And I've already given you a list of some of those things I want to know about. Oops, maybe I haven't given you a list. Here, these are the ones I'm going to use. I want record number, just because I need a counter. And it helps me keep things in sequence in case I reorder the data, and that can mess me up. I want to know when did they start their program, that what type of program they're currently enrolled in, where are they from, a bunch of these questions. These are the questions I picked. So what do? I'm going to do this. I want to know the survey ID, so I'm going to copy that column. For me, I just use Control C. That's an old school method of copying that goes back to the very, very first days of microcomputers. And I'm going to create a new sheet, hit my plus sign, and I will just paste that in. So I want ID. Back to my data. I want questions 3, 5, and 7. I'm going to grab all of these ones because I'm lazy. And I'm going to go back to my sheet. I'm going to paste these guys in. I don't want this one, so let me delete it. And this one I don't want, so I'm going to delete it. Okay. What else do I want? So ID 3, 5, 7. I want 14, ABCD, 15, and 16. So let's go over here. Where are those ones? Ooh, there's one of them. I'm copying it and pasting. So again, these are ones that I wanted here, and the last ones are right at the end of the list, 50 something. So for those of you new to Excel, when I'm copying these things, I could go and highlight everything that I want, go all the way down, or if I'm going to select the whole column, I could just click on the EA, and if I hold down my Shift key and go across, I'm going to capture all the other columns that are here. And again, to copy it, I could right click and say copy, or the shortcut is Control and C is the shortcut for copy. I go over to this sheet, I go up here, I could go and right click and hit paste, or if I hit Control and the letter V, V as in value, it'll paste it in, but I don't want 55. So I'll take it out. This is the data I'm going to be using Okay, and this we'll be using for a couple of classes, the same chunk of data. All the other stuff, because there's so many columns, is going to confuse me. Okay, I don't need all of this stuff. And often when we're studying something, we don't need all the variables in a database. This you can view as the big database. Extract the variables that you would like to study. I like to do this and keep them in separate sheets here in the same workbook, because it may be that I want to go back and pull in something else. And I should probably give it a name. So the sheet here, if you right click, you can rename it. And I could rename it as grad expectations. That's what I'm studying. And it is useful to rename those sheets as you go, because you're going to start forgetting what was sheet 3, what was sheet 4, because we'll find as we move through the course, we may create multiple sheets as we go. So this becomes my data file that I'm going to work with. Okay. It's smaller. I'm just using the variables that are important, but it still can't understand what all I've got. So here's the big thing that I've copied. This is, hey, I didn't cut out 55. I should have removed it because I don't want that one. Anyway, so I've renamed it. Now I'm going to be always treating this table as these are variables and these are observations, records in it. So many spreadsheets have different format. An accounting spreadsheet, yeah, they've got formulas and all kinds of stuff inside it. A data sheet, though, has columns for each variable and rows for each record, each observation, each student that answered. So with this one, I'd like to treat it as a data table. And this is a really neat thing, something I didn't know about it until just a couple of years ago. And I've been using Excel for data analysis for decades. If I go, select any cell, just one, go up to insert. There are many things I can choose up here, but I'm going to insert a table. I mean, it's already a table, isn't it? Rows, columns, that looks like a table. Click on it. It asks, where is the table? Well, it's in column A, row 1, and it goes all the way across to N, column N, and the bottom row is 812. And if you scroll down, you can find it's 812. It knows, it guesses generally what the dimensions are. So if you don't have lots of white space, gaps like this, it can judge the dimensions of this table. And it also noted the top row seems to be different from everything below it. This one is text. These are numbers. So it's already guessed that I have headers. These are headings to it. So click OK. If it hadn't guessed this, I would have had to tell it the dimensions of the table and that it had headers. So here's my table. Different. It's pretty. It's got, I like the highlighting so that I know record number 448, I can read all the way across all the things. So reading rows in the table are much easier because they're alternating white and blue back and forth. And my headings stand out as being in dark blue. And I've got little arrows. And we'll be probably not using those arrows today, but we will in our next class. So there's my table, and that's useful to have a table. And we'll see shortly why it's useful to have it. So I've done that. And so I've got my data file looking nice, pretty. It's still hard to understand. And let's focus now on that aspect, trying to make it easier to understand. The names of the columns, what is Q3, Q5, Q7? What's Q14A? It's Q57. Make them names you can understand. If you were doing Quant 1, if I was teaching it to you, I would tell you you were not allowed to use the letter X for a variable. Because what is X? give it a name. If it was the number of units of product A, I'd call it A, so it would remind me what it is. So pick names that mean something to you. So these are the names I've picked. Q3 is when did they start? This survey wasn't just of first year students, it was all students. So some were fourth year, some third year, second year, first year. Some of them had started many, many years ago and have been studying part-time. So there was quite a mix. So let me go and put in those names. And I'm going to just type them in here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to call this one Spark. This one here, yips. What was I going to call it? Excuse me. That's program home. Okay, I remember. So this one is program. This one I'm going to call home. Where did you go to school? This is finding, are you worried about finding any job at all? This one is a job in your major. This one is one that pays you enough. This one is where you want to live. I don't want to go to Fort McMurray. This is the salary I think I'm going to earn when I graduate. This is how long it's going to take me to find a job. What are these ones? This is gender, age, parent ed, and language. So this one is gender, age, parent education, and this one is language. So now at least I know what the different variables are, what they represent. And then I can start looking at the numbers and I may start trying to interpret some of these ones. So this was a survey done in the winter of 2010. So a student that started in 2009 was a first year student. That these things, I don't know what these are. Expected to earn only $20,000 at graduation and take 6 months to get that job. The student thought they would earn $450,000. Nice job. And find a job within 4 months. Some of them didn't seem to give us answers to some questions. We got these blank spaces. We'll get to those issues. But these ones here are words. I'd like to clean that up. So let me look at trying to change some of these things around and try to make them easier to understand. And program is the one we're going to work on first and fix those numbers that are there. That 4 is social sciences. That I don't want to have to memorize these things, memorize these codes. So I'm going to create a new column that has a word instead that will say social science or say arts or something like that instead of program, instead of a number, excuse me, instead of the number 4. And I'm going to try to summarize this. Remember, I've got a lot of programs that I don't have. So I'm going to make up a table that looks a little different from this. I'm going to, we've got these problems about programs, and we'll talk about the strange things in a second. Let me do it first. Here this was education, this was visual arts 1 and 2. I'm just going to say they're invalid. And for social science and humanities, humanities is 3, social science is 4. Many people get confused. They're both part of a Bachelor of Arts, so let's just call them art students. 5 is medicine. That one doesn't fit. 6 was business. This was, there are several that look to be science ones. Oh, I thought I was going to call one engineering. Maybe I will. And then there are a bunch again that are invalid. So I'm going to make up this table and I'm going to take these numbers and convert them to those words. Let me go back here. Okay. How do I do that? I'm going to put them together. First, right over here by program. select the program column. If I right-click on the column, I can insert, and it'll create a column over here to the left. I'm going to make these columns just a little bit wider. Okay. So it's called it column 1. I gave it a name. That normally when you insert a column, Excel doesn't put anything in there. This one gave it a name. I want to call it program. I don't know if you can see it. Look what happened here. It's changed this one to say program 2. In a data table, every column has to have a unique name. I cannot have two variables for the same thing. So that Excel, if this is the one I want to call program, it'll go and change the name of this one, and it does that by just incrementing it with a number. And what I want to put in here are the words. So I'm going to do a mapping of numbers to words. The sort of table I showed you a minute ago is what's known as a lookup table. You look up the number and it tells you the word. Look up this number, tells you the word. That lookup tables are a very, very common device for recoding data or translating it. So that's what I'm going to do here. And let me just move over a little bit and I'll show you the lookup table I'm going to use. Okay? So this one I'm lumping my engineering students under science. Probably shouldn't. I'm going to go back and change this. Because, let me go back. Engineering ends up being, whoops, excuse me. I want to find engineering. Where is engineering? So we had physical and life sciences. That's like chemistry and biology. Math, computing science. Okay, this next one down, this third one here is engineering. Because we have an engineering program that's separate. It's in the Faculty of Science or managed by them, but it's treated separately. And then we have environmental science. So environmental science fits in the science program. Now we have an environmental studies program, which is in arts, but we didn't 10 years ago. So let me go back here, and I'm going to change this one to engineering. Okay. So, and the other guys, I'm just going to say there's something wrong with them. Let me go back into this file I've got here. So whoops, excuse me. This isn't the one I'm working on. This is going to be the final result. Here we go. So how do I translate one to the other? I'm going to use a function, a formula. For Excel to recognize a formula, you've got to put in an equal sign. Put equals. You'll see there's a formula bar up here that's going to save that information as well. I'm using a function called VLOOKUP, a value lookup. If you type in VL, it starts picking the formula in Excel, the function. So I've got that. It's going to take an old value. Where's my old value? My old value, or my starting value, is in column D, row 2, D2. And I want to change that to a new value. Change it, I need to know, well, where do I find the new value? I find the new value in a table. Let me stretch this out a little bit so I don't have to. There it is. There's my lookup table. Here's my table. And the information, I know I've got headers up here, but the real important stuff is this. Select all of it. Okay. I don't know if you can see it, but my formula is still up here. I've gone to a different sheet, but the formula I was working on is still up here. And it says D2, VLOOKUP D2, lookup tables, that's the name of the sheet, from A2 to B15. Okay. And where is the new value? The original value is here, is in the first column. The original value is always in the first column. The new value in this one, because it's just a 2-column table, is in the second column. We could have tables with 5 columns, and you have to tell it which column in that big table it is. And I want what's called an exact match. I want to match up. 1 is with invalid, 2 is with invalid, and there's a back and forth that way. So I'm going to click on false. Okay. Hit bracket, and what happens? Throws me back where I was. Got the first student, arts. Second one, arts. Next one was business, science. What's going on here? These are all wrong. What are all these not applicable? Okay. If you look at it, in this one, I said my table went from A2 to B15. That's where the top corner and the bottom corner is. What did it say for the next one? It goes from A3 to B16. No, it doesn't. That's deleting the top row of that table and adding a new one at the bottom. Excel will do these types of things. You have to be careful. It tries to guess what you're trying to do, and it guessed wrong. So sometimes Excel guesses right, sometimes it's wrong. What I've got to do is go back in here, and if you can see what I've got, I want this lookup table to always be A2 to B15, never anything different for this table. Put $signs in front of the A, so it always picks column A, and it always starts with row 2. That and the end of the table is always in column B, and the table always ends in 15. Putting $signs around it will lock it in. Now what happens? Changed everything. Notice it applied this formula to everybody in the column. If I had not made this a data table, it would have only done the first one and left all of these blanks, and I'd have to copy the formula into all of these spaces. With a table, it automatically performs whatever you do in that first row to everybody. And that's actually what I want. So now I can see what program these different students are in terms of art, business, science, and so on. Similarly, I could recode home, any job, these sorts of things. Yes, F4 will put them in as well. That and depending upon your keyboard, mine with this laptop, it doesn't behave well. Actually, my keyboard at the moment is defective and isn't doing things right anyway. But yes, on a PC, F4 puts in all of the $signs for you. It's the quick way of doing it. So when I first typed this, when I got to this point, and so I'd been typing up my formula. If I had hit F4, it would have thrown all of those $signs in for me. And there are all kinds of shortcuts in Excel that some of them are different on a Mac. And some things just don't seem to work. I'm finding in Office 365. I don't use Office 365 very much. Generally, to just show another student when doing a screen share, because it doesn't have all the features in it, and it can be a problem at times. So I can recode all these others, and I've done that by creating all my other lookup tables for recoding home, where they are, recoding gender, parental education, language. I can do all of those ones that, and I'll end up getting a table that, oops, where to go? Oh, here it is. I think the one I posted has all of that stuff already done. Okay, so I could recode home. Again, it uses a VLOOKUP, goes to the table, looks for the stuff, does the translation. We'll look at this one I've called salary group in a minute. It's a different type of VLOOKUP, but I've recoded gender. Actually, let me just show you this. Okay, a couple of things here. Let me go back to my slides so I don't miss things. So And I put those things in. We got program done. Oh, no, it isn't row 9. That's for something else, I think. Anyway, so it applied it to all the rows. That now, some of the things, like I mentioned on program, we were getting this invalid stuff. What was going on there? Students, if you were going and picking your program, with business, it may be straightforward. But think of the art student, that they are studying psychology. And psychology is a social science. But the way the question was posed, it defined social science as being social and behavioral sciences, political science, sociology, anthropology. I'm in psychology, the single most popular social science. Where does it fit? Or if I was in the humanities, again, there's a huge range of different humanities. They only list a couple of them. Students might not know which one to pick. And one in particular for St. Mary's is we've got a very popular criminology program. And most students that are studying crim want to get into correction services. They want to get into the RCMP, border security, prisons, something like that. And or maybe they want to go on and study law and get a law degree. So they don't see criminology. They don't realize it's a social science. It's a subset of sociology. And the closest thing that you can think of is to pick law or protective services is maybe what they think it is. So it's just because they didn't see it in their list. There are a lot of students, particularly in arts, that their ambition is to become teachers. They'd like to get into education. So they're doing a BA in French to become a teacher of French. They may not pick humanities, which French would fit under, but pick education as to what they think they're studying because that's where they want to go. Or the student doing biology really wants to get into medicine. And so they don't think of themselves as studying biology, they think of themselves as preparing for medicine, that it's a pathway. That misunderstanding questions is unfortunately too common. With some of them at $450,000 salary, that's probably a data entry error, or they're just messing with us. Um, they're, but often as we start recoding things, we can start seeing what is messed up. Now, that look at what's happened with some of these ones. Okay, and what happened with gender, parental education, with language, and with parental education and language, I've got a whole bunch of not applicables. And that's because the original information was blank. So when I put in my VLOOKUP formula, it said, go and look up under this table for parental education. Okay? It says 1 is high school, 2 is college, 3 is bachelor degree. Oops, typo, professional degree. Uh, um, and master's, doctorate, not sure. What do you put in for a blank? If someone doesn't give me a number, they've given me a blank and I don't have an answer for them. So when it was recoded, oops, excuse me, it just put in not applicable for the blank. And that's what's going to happen. Now, it's annoying. There are different conventions we can use for missing values. We may want to code them certain ways. Excel has a little bit of trouble dealing with it. Let me go and look at gender, though. Here's blank for gender, but it's still blank. I don't have a not applicable. Look at my table. Gender, 0 is male, 1 is female. But it didn't do it that way. Well, actually, it's because I cheated. I put a different formula in here for gender, and I'm going to change it. I'm going to wipe this out. I'm just going to say equals V lookup. Uh, that's in Oops. Okay. In the gender 2 column, I clicked on it, so it's picked that guy. It's actually in a specific column. I guess that would be O2. So you can put in O2. If I go to my lookup table, pick gender, okay, and I'm not sure if it's going to let me do the F4 properly on this or not. No, it didn't. Excuse me. Let me go back and do this again. And I'm having trouble with my keyboard. So I want O2 is table. Let me put it in the hard way. I'll manually put in the dollar signs. Okay. The new value is in column 2. And I want an exact match. Great. Oops. Go to this. Turn these blanks all into males. 1 female, that's right. 0 male, right? That's right, that's right. Oh, here I've taken another blank. It's assumed every male student, or every blank student is a male student. Any idea what happened? Yeah, it thinks blank's a 0. So in my lookup table, notice I've got 0 equals something. In this table, I didn't have 0 equal to something. If I had 0 equal to something, it would probably have changed that. I'm curious, what had happened? I didn't think of doing this. I'm just going to put in 0 and I'm going to leave it. Let's see if it went back and recoded my. No, it didn't do anything with parental education. Okay. What if I put in blanks? No, it didn't refresh it. Okay. So the 0 becomes a problem. It converts a missing value, a blank value, into a 0. So what I did with this is I changed this formula. So in here, what I'd like to say is if O2 value is equal to a blank. A blank is quote, quote, two quotes, nothing in between. If it's equal to a blank, then leave it a blank. If it isn't a blank, then use my VLOOKUP formula. I'll need one more bracket here. So an if statement says if a condition, A equals B or something like that, then do something. And if it's not true, then do something else. So there's a true outcome and a false outcome for that thing. And hopefully I did it right. See, it works. Cleans up all of those. So you got to think about some of these sorts of things, how it's going to mess you up when you're doing this translation with certain variables. Uh, so we're going through data preparation here in different ways, and you have to think carefully about how it's cleaning it. But I'm getting into a data file now that's getting easier to read. I can look at student 488, started in 2008, studying business. It's from Ontario. I'll explain this salary expectation in a minute. It's a female student, 19 years old. Parents, the highest education of any parent is a master's degree. Her first language is English. Now I can start reading this, whereas before it was all cryptic codes. What did I do here? Okay, let me go back. So we did that. We fixed that. So this was the script that I put in there to be able to do that sort of thing. An approximate match. Remember, this one was an exact match. Then what's an approximate match? Um, are you approximately male or approximately female or mostly male, mostly female? Are you mostly in business? What does that mean? With these descriptors I've got, that generally is the case, that it's a direct coding one-to-one. But sometimes we like to group our data. We'd like to take a range of values and assign them to a group. So maybe I'd like to say, if your expected salary is under 20,000, I'm going to say that's very low. If it's $20,000 to $40,000 as a starting salary, it's still pretty low. Even 10 years ago, that was pretty low. 40 to 60 was about average. Those were typical. A lot of students, graduates expected to earn that, and starting salaries did tend to be generally in that range. Getting up to around 80 in 2 years, that's quite high. Over 80, that would be very high. For if you were a part-time student already into a career and you're 33 years old, then maybe that isn't. Above 100,000, that's probably unrealistic for a majority of students, but there may be certain special cases on that. So maybe I'd like to have a lookup table that converts this ranges of values to words. And because I don't want to look at the specific salary amounts, but just categories. Look at who's average, who's very high, who's very low. And you'll notice with this, I know it has two numbers, 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, but do I need all those values? Do I need both of them? That for each group, actually, if I'm using, and this works with VLOOKUP, I just need the starting value. So 0 up to 20. So the first group starts at 0. The second group starts at 20. And so if your expectation was 22,000, you're not in the first group. You're into the second one, but you can't fit into the next one because you're not over 40. So what group are you in? And let's make up that as a lookup table. So that's what I did. I created a lookup table, should be tucked over here, that created these different groups. And this is the starting value. Oh, sorry, I picked 120 instead of 100. Excuse me. And then tried to translate that over. So what I did was I created a new column. I inserted beside salary one called salary group, and I put in a formula that said equals VLOOKUP. I'm going to take L2, their salary expectation. I'm going to take the table here, all right? I'm going to put the dollar signs in. Okay. The new value is in the second column. And well, if I did it the way I did it before and picked exact match, let's see what happens. You'll notice for 20, which is one of the boundaries, it puts them in the low. 60, it put them in the high. 40, put them into the average. Blank, which is treating a 0, into the very low, and so on down. It's only picking those exact values. So if I change this, though, true, and enter, then it groups them. Okay, so it's approximate, and it by an approximate match, it's a way of grouping things together. And uh, sometimes we're going to want to take a numeric variable like this and just look at categories. It makes it easier for doing some types of summaries and analyses to not have to worry about the individual specific numbers. I don't care if it's 43,000 or 44,000. They're sort of average. Let's just grab them, pull them all together. And so I did all that. And da 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 da. So now it's such that I can go and look at them. The one in for 472, first year student, started in 2009, studying business. It's from Nova Scotia, female, parents' education unknown, speaks English at home, salary expectations very low. Where is she? This is this one here. Okay. Um, Now it's easier to read the data table and make sense out of it. So this very first stage, we haven't done any analysis at all. We're just starting to make it something we can start understanding. We've already started seeing problems with programs they picked. We're starting to see problems with the salaries they're picking. There may be something wrong here. We may discover other types of things. We're going to have to figure out, how do we deal with the students? If we wanted to look at gender comparisons, what do we do with the students that didn't tell us their gender, didn't tell us this information? Oops, excuse me. I guess I'm out of class time here. So we're going to wrap up. We've created a file, or a new file, or a new sheet, so that we protected the original. We use table to make it easier to see the data, organize it, and work on it. We've renamed variables to make them easier to remember. We've used VLOOKUP with an exact match so that we could put words where they're numbers in things, and recoded it to make it easier. Sometimes we'll use VLOOKUP for other purposes as well, in terms of recoding values to make them easier to work with. I used an if statement. That's another way of doing recoding instead of VLOOKUP. So with simple ones, an if statement might work better. And we started grouping data and aggregating it. Sometimes the values are just, there's too much information, too much detail, and it's hard for us to process. That, from a data science perspective, that's an Excel activity. We've seen the need for a data dictionary, a need for data protection. Um, and this also becomes an issue of data privacy and making your data secure, so that if you lost your computer or your USB storage device, uh, is it such that others could potentially get in there and get personal information? Um, Generally, the first thing I do is I look to see, is there personal information in a data file, and I strip it out, put it elsewhere, make it such that if something got lost, or something got stolen, they're not going to get the personal data. Um, and we started doing some preparation of our data to make it better for us. But recoding can have unintended consequences, like that making blanks into min. And we start discovering some of our data quality issues. Not all of them. Some are often very, very hard to find where there are problems, but you'll start recognizing things to go and start looking out for. And what we're going to do now is start going and looking for patterns in the data. Can we summarize it? Can we identify what's really important in a data set, what's less important in the data set? And we'll move through some very basic tools and gradually get into more and more complex ones. But some of the content may be familiar to you. It may be easy in terms of that. Uh, but for many, the learning curve with Excel is slow. So getting into these topics, it's trying to do that balance of the steepness of the learning curve on the content and the learning curve on the Excel, and balancing the two. Um, I think that is our in for today. Sorry for going over. Oh, again, different sorts of things that we're going to be seeing, and this is going to go on for weeks to come, that we start getting into the exploration and then start getting into actually doing modeling. But as we move through, part of it you may view as data understanding, part of it is data preparation. I look at it as data exploration. I'm just exploring it, not knowing what I'm looking for, but trying to get a good understanding of what I've got there and what might be interesting or opportunities. Uh, that I did mention your assignment I hope to post this week. So I'm turning off the survey that I've had you contributing to. Not as many answers as I would have liked. 214 this morning in total. Not quite my goal. But already I'm just going through to make sure the data is tidy to work with when I merge the two data sets, this year's and last. And I've got to go through your comments to make sure nobody has posted something that is inappropriate or violates someone else's privacy or something of that nature, um, and to tidy up that. And my first glance is it's all safe to use, but I'm disclosing all of the data. Okay, so anyway, we're out of time. I won't hold you up any longer. You have a great day, and you'll see me again on Wednesday. Take care.